Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks for joining me this week. Appreciate it, as always. This week, I am interviewing another really cool person in this kind of performance arts, interesting profession world. We talked a few weeks ago to somebody who's a ballet dancer professionally, has devoted their life to that, all that kind of stuff. This week, kind of in that same realm, now we're going to talk to an Irish dancer. Now, I've always been interested in Irish dance. Of course, I've seen, Riverdance and that type of thing. We're going to talk about that, about how it's similar, but it's also different. It's kind of a form of Irish dance, but it's a little bit different. And, how she feels about kind of everyone's association to Irish dance, Riverdance, and how there's a lot more to it than just what you see there, which is already impressive enough. The real Irish dancing is even more impressive. So it kind of led me into the world of, oh goodness, these fancy costumes, these fancy outfits that are all made in Ireland, these sky-high wigs that, the young ladies wear in competition. Just a fascinating world. I really do think you're going to enjoy this one. I really enjoyed speaking to Claudia Morrison. That is who I'm speaking with this week. She is a professional Irish dancer, a little bit different than the ballerina, the ballet dancer that I spoke with, where she works for a company that allows her to be professional at the same time as going to school and kind of pursuing that world as well. So I learned so much. I do think you'll learn a lot too, whether you're into this performance art stuff, you're into Irish dancing or any of these type of things. I think you're going to enjoy just hearing about something that I don't think a ton of people know about. I mean, maybe you know a little bit about ballet that we spoke about a few weeks ago, but do you truly know that much about Irish dance? I hope you're listening and yeah, that's why I came here. I wanted to hear more about my friend Claudia. If that's the case, welcome. But for those who don't, I do think you're going to learn a lot. Everything from these interesting outfits and why they wear these sky-high wigs to why don't they move their arms? Why are they only moving their legs? We're going to talk about some of those folklore legends behind that too, but this was a fun one. Here is my interview with Claudia Morrison. I'm here today with Claudia Morrison. Claudia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Love doing it.
For sure. So before we kind of get into my questions, if you would just introduce yourself. Who's Claudia?
So I'm Claudia. I'm 19 years old, almost 20, and I'm an Irish dancer professionally. I also have an account on Instagram that I like to post videos on. And so I'm from Chicago. I grew up dancing both Irish dance and, ballet, traditional types of dance. So I've been dancing for, I think, about 17 years now. So been doing it for a long time. And yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're almost 20, you've been dancing for 16 or 17 years, then I'm envisioning we had some young, almost toddler Claudia doing the dance then, huh?
Yeah. I started when I was 3 doing ballet. And then by the time I was 5, that's when I got into Irish dancing. But I've been dancing ever since I was 3.
That's really cool. And I want to kind of get into your story when it comes to Irish dancing here in a moment. But we've already mentioned Irish dancing. That's what we're talking to you about and being professional in that. But I always like to just break things down for people who, don't know about all kinds of things. I've made people break down darn near everything to the basic level. So tell us what Irish dancing is for someone who doesn't know.
So Irish dancing is a style of dance. It comes from, it's very, very traditional, stems hundreds and hundreds of years back to Ireland and sometimes some Scottish, but mainly it started from Ireland, and it is usually a quick-paced type of dancing. You usually see dancers with their arms down, moving very fast and quick. Sometimes I like to say, for people who don't know Irish dancing, Riverdance, actually their type of dancing is Irish dancing. It's very fast paced, but it can also change. And there's a lot of traditions with it. We always dance to certain musics, like a reel or a jig that you see on St. Patrick's Day. And it's kind of been like that for a good while.
Everything you're saying there, I'm glad that I researched correctly, because a lot of these questions you just mentioned. So we're going to kind of go into a little more detail. So I'm glad I've got some of the right questions for you. And the next one is going to be about something you just mentioned. I guess kind of just the different dance moves. Obviously, it's kind of hard to truly have people envision it when it comes to a podcast, but I think everyone knows, do a little jig or a reel. What exactly is that?
So really, a jig or a reel. There's also slip jig and hornpipe, and heavy jig as well. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of like the main types of dancing that we do. It's kind of like categories, kind of like when you think of like Spanish dancing, there's the mamba, there's, salsa dancing. It's like that. So it's all under the Irish, umbrella basically, but each kind of music and style is a little different. So jig, that's what a lot of people, are commonly refer as Irish dancing. That's a lot of jumping. It's very basic, a lot of just jumps together, lifting the legs, not super complex. It's usually what we teach the youngest dancers just so that they can start getting into it. And then reel is very similar. It's very high, fast paced, but you usually move a lot more. It's a lot more intricate. And then from there, it always switches, and so like the jig and reel, you always see it in our soft shoes or our gillies, which don't make noise, a lot like ballet that you would see. And then we have the other styles, heavy jig, hornpipe, all that. And that's with our heavy shoes, which have fiberglass tips that make the sound for them. So it really, the different, like a jig and a reel, they're just kind of classifications of Irish dance. But a lot of times the moves are similar. It's just different music and then just different rhythms, really.
I got you. Yeah, and you mentioned another thing too that I want to ask you about. You're the one that kind of brought it up. I've kind of done a little bit of research and talked to a few people in this kind of area, and I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but how do you feel about the association so much with Riverdance? I'm sure you get it all the time where people are like, "Oh, you Irish dance, isn't that Riverdance?" And I feel like it's a little bit different, correct? And how do you feel about everyone just automatically saying basically you're a river dancer?
I mean, Riverdance is, a very nice production. It's a very, it brought Irish dance into, everyone's world for those who weren't, born knowing about Irish dance and everything. It's definitely different from, competition. And then there's even like, performing arts type of Irish dance. Riverdance is a more commercial style. So a lot of it is, a lot of it's about like the show and less about more like the movements. So, I mean, I'm fine if like anyone, says Riverdance. I mean, it's definitely, I've gotten it so many times, I can assure you, but I definitely think that Riverdance made it very well known, but there's a lot more to Irish dance than just Riverdance.
Yeah, and what I read was that Riverdance is definitely big on the showmanship of it and kind of focusing completely on that dance and being synchronous, where Irish dancing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of that has to do way more with the actual costuming and the music and all kinds of stuff like that, where there's things that they just kind of cut out because it doesn't matter as much for the show.
Yeah, there's definitely big differences. There's kind of like three categories in Irish dance. You have like commercial, which is like Riverdance, Lord of the Dance, all those shows you see and that are really well known and travel everywhere. There's competitive, which is usually it's where everyone going into Riverdance starts. When you learn Irish dance, you start in the competition phase. And then there's the performing arts side of Irish dance, which is where my company is, which is different than all three. And they're all different in each way. Competitive Irish dance, yeah, there's a lot more with costumes and a lot more rules and regulations. I mentioned in the past about like having your arms not move. You can't have your arms move. You can't go down to the floor. There's so many regulations. You have to dance to a specific kind of music when you're there. And then Riverdance, it's more free from that. You have a lot more of a distance between the competitive side. But there's definitely still some like characteristics from each that kind of blend into each other. There's a lot of, repetition in Riverdance, like there is in competitive dance. And then you have, my own company, Trinity Irish Dance Company, and we're actually the only performing arts Irish dance company there is. And a lot of it is a lot more modern. It's changing kind of Irish dance while keeping the traditions, but loosening a lot of those rules and regulations and creating something new.
No, that's really cool. Yeah. And I think anyone who's seen Irish dance, that's the first thing people notice is the whole, arms not moving, most of the upper torso not moving at all. What's the history behind that and why is that the case?
There's a lot of just folklore and, stories behind it, which of course, we're Irish, we got to have good story behind it. But the main one I've heard is that way back, all the way back when, the English were kind of controlling Ireland and all their people and their culture, they would ban dancing, they would ban like parties and get-togethers. So what people would do to fool the English is they would dance, but because in the windows you could only see their top half, they'd keep their arms down. So when anyone walked by, they wouldn't, think that they were dancing or having a party. They think they were just, walking around, but in reality, they were dancing. And so that's one of the main stories. There's probably, a different thing. It might have just, happened, but that's the one we get told all the time.
I like that one. That wasn't the one that I read. I like that even better. The one that I saw was just that it was kind of started out in the Catholic Church, religious, and they just didn't want, the young people to be touching each other. So they just told them to keep their hands to their sides. But I like yours better. That's funny.
There's a ton. I think there's no actual person who knows why we do that. There's definitely a lot of stories behind it.
I feel like that just adds obviously a huge layer of complexity. How hard is that? Because obviously we use our hands for balance, and when you're moving so quickly and not able to use that balance, I can't even imagine the complexity behind that. How hard is it to do that?
Really hard. I teach beginners who, just start, and that's one of the things a lot of times that they struggle with most is keeping those arms into balance. It definitely, you have to train your body and know your center of balance when you first start. And that's kind of the first step to it. And then from there, you kind of add on to it. But even now, like, the older you get, there's still people who struggle keeping their arms in. That's why, it's such a, you see some of the best competitive dancers and they have just a completely rigid body because they have to train so hard to do that. It's a lot harder to actually keep your arms in than it is to just let them flow like you see in other dances.
Yeah, and how much, because I've talked to other people in different performance arts, some other dancing like ballet, and I always want to know how much your certain style of dance lends itself to other styles. Obviously, I feel like this is quite different than a lot of the other different dancing. So, how well do you think, a hip hop dancer or a ballerina or something like that would do in something like this? Do you think it lends itself well to other performance art, or is it just completely on its own? Because I see a lot of people, I take tap and I take ballet. I don't feel like I see a lot of people that are like tap, ballet, and Irish dancing.
Yeah, I'm one of the rare few who actually grew up, doing both styles. And I've met girls. I've actually tried teaching some friends of mine who are dancers and tappers how to do Irish dance. And, for me, I grew up doing it, so it's very easy for me to switch between them. But it definitely, the more I saw other people try to jump in, even though they were completely trained dancers, it definitely made me realize how, different it is. Tap and Irish dance are probably the most similar, mainly because tap came from Irish dance. So, especially with the rhythms and stuff, and we've worked in the past, my company and I, with tappers. We have a dance that is a tap and Irish fusion, and that's probably like the easiest bridge between the two, just because it's just a lot of footwork and rhythms. But yeah, when it comes to our more of our soft dances, our soft shoe dances, like I said before, that are like kind of like ballet, it's very, very different, because there's very big difference in like shifting your weight. Irish dancers, we constantly shift back and forth, every second. And in other dances, it's like you keep all your weight in your back or in your front, and then you slowly like move through that within it. So it's a lot of balancing and moving quickly and mobility.
Yeah, no, I could see kind of how tap would maybe be the easiest one to kind of transition from. So kind of let's talk about your background in Irish dance. We've already talked about how you started as a 3 or 4 year old, but what made you, because you said that you went from ballet to then doing Irish dance, what made you make that move? Or is your family Irish dancers, or what happened there?
Well, my grandpa was first gen from Ireland, but we didn't have any Irish dancers, actually, and we didn't even really know about Irish dance until one St. Patrick's Day when I was in preschool. One of the girls came and did a little jig or a little reel, and while everyone else kind of left because we were preschoolers, I followed her around and I tried to like actually dance with her, even though I had no clue what Irish dancing was. And then so I went home and I begged my mom to let me, go into Irish dancing. And my mom thought it was a phase. She was just like, oh, whatever, like she'll, forget about it in a couple months, but I didn't. I kept begging her and begging her. So finally she took me to just this little like 1-day clinic thing just for me to try it out. And I just fell in love with it. And then I ended up at my the school I grew up dancing to and I now teach at, which is Dylan Gavin's school. And I danced there my entire life. Yeah.
So how many people is that generally the story where it is Irish dancing? And I'm trying to figure out exactly how to phrase this. Is there a lot of phase dancers? Because obviously, I would say 70%, and this is non-scientific, but 70% of young girls take ballet or they do something like that, but they don't join a ballet school and become a ballerina. That's just a kind of a thing. Is there a lot of young people that do Irish dance and then they move on, or is it something that really there's a lot of people that once they're in it they really stick with it for long term?
I mean, it definitely depends. Most of the people I've danced with have gone long term. I think also it depends on how they're looking at Irish dance. Some people go into Irish dance just wanting, the tiaras and the trophies and, the sashes and all the glitz. And, after a while that kind of, loses its glamour And, but there's other people like me who, they join it and they just fall in love with it. I mean, some girls, they do get put in because, their mom was an Irish dancer or, one of their family members is Irish. And so they do it for a cultural reason other than just, wanting to dance. I think it just really depends. And it also depends on the school and, where they're doing it. Like Chicago, we have a big Irish community, but in other states and parts of the country, it's not as common and it's harder to really get into it.
Yeah, and you talking about it being not as common in different parts of the country. I mean, that kind of adds to another layer, another question of how popular is it worldwide? Obviously, there's ballet schools across the world. There's all kinds of things like that. But is there a lot of Irish dancing going on, across the world, or is it more in certain countries really do it and others don't?
Well, I mean, it is primarily UK, Canada, and the US that are in it, in Ireland. But recently, actually, there's been a lot of dance schools opening up in different countries. In my company itself, we have a dancer from Mexico who has his own school in Mexico, as well as there's a lot in Russia. There's a lot in Germany. the Netherlands. Australia is actually really big as well. And so it's slowly spreading. I mean, it's definitely, because it does have a lot of cultural factors into it. It tends to go to people with a more, Irish based, population. But there's, I sometimes get surprised when I'm, looking at dancers and I find out that they're from, the Netherlands. And, I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that they had that there. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And you mentioned your company quite a few times. What does it mean, I guess, to be a professional Irish dancer and be part of a company?
Well, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Definitely. I love it though. I mean, my company, Trinity Irish Dance Company, is a Chicago-based company. And we've been around, actually, we started in the early 90s. Of course, I was not alive then, right before Riverdance started. And we tend to take Irish dance and try to push its boundaries. We try to keep that integrity into it while exploring other types of, fusion and Irish steps and everything. I mentioned before that we have an Irish tap number that's, a mix between the two. We have, contemporary movements as well. We really strive for equity for, females in the industry, especially in Irish dance, as well as, like empowering the youth and inspiring the next generation.
No, that's really cool. And that was something I've asked in other dances that you brought up that I didn't even think to ask about. What does it look like as far as the makeup? Is there way more men in it? Is there way more women in it? Is it pretty equal, or what does that look like?
Well, in our company, it's primarily female dominant. We only have 2 males, which is very different, in Riverdance, where it's, half and half. It's very split. Generally in Irish dance itself, even in competition, there is a way smaller amount of males who Irish dance than there is females. My competitions when I was younger, I would have 200 plus girls in my competition in my age group. And for boys in that same age group, there would be like 50. So there's a very big difference between the amount of females and males in Irish dance. But we always try to promote, like equality between the two.
Yeah, I feel like that it's kind of the same, but I feel like most dance, most arts forms like that, they do struggle with that diversity. So it sounds like it's about the same there. You mentioned competition. Now I know that you're in a different area, but talk about what Irish dance competition kind of is and what it looks like. From the outside looking in and seeing pictures, it looks like a lot of very fancy outfits and some very tall hair.
Yeah. I've multiple times been asked if I've done pageants from my pictures. So competition, it is very different. It's like I said, there's a lot of rules and regulations. It's very strict. We do have, like the tanner and the dresses and the wigs. A lot of those stem from tradition. Like all of our dresses are handmade in Ireland and embroidered, which dates back to, old Irish costumes where they would embroider knots and all like, family symbols and crests and everything onto them. So it is kind of similar to that. It's definitely evolved into more like showy. There's rhinestones and everything. And same with the wigs. The wigs are actually fairly new. They started off as just girls would curl their hair, trying to keep that, the Irish heritage of the red curly hair. It's kind of like the stereotype of an Irish girl. So they actually invented the wigs so that girls didn't have to curl their hair. And then from there, it just kind of evolved and got bigger and bigger. So now you see these huge wigs with, dress and the tanner to make our legs look stronger on stage. And a lot of it is mainly to stand out. Because like I said before, I've had competitions with 200 plus girls. And when you're on stage, you're with other dancers. You're not just by yourself. So you have to stand out when you're on stage. And so that's kind of where those come in. But otherwise, a lot of it is very systematic in the way that we dance. There's, we have to dance for, 16 bars for our first step, another 16 bars for our second step. And we have to dance to a certain type of music at a certain speed. And so there's a lot more rules with that as well.
Yeah, I just think obviously most other dancing wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't be able to have those wigs because they do move their upper body. I feel like I assume they're pretty well clipped on, but I still think that would be tough for almost anything else. And I can't imagine, when you're already having to do all these other things to now have a wig that I'm sure is not super light. I'm sure that just adds to some issues with being successful.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the amount of headaches I've had from wigs, it surpasses a lot of the competition sometimes. But yeah, we actually try to train with, like, I've tried training, with my dress on, just so you can get used to that weight. And yeah, those wigs are, glued in with so many hairpins and everything. And it definitely adds to the weight of your head. And that's why a lot of times we have, smaller competitions, and we always encourage, people to go to those small competitions so that they can wear their wig and their dress and be on stage and practice, because it's completely different from when you're just practicing with a t-shirt and shorts.
Can only imagine. I just wondered too, you talked about how with competition, everything is like almost down to the T. You have to do 16 bars here to your first step, all this stuff, that everything is so rigid. How is it? How do they decide that, the winners of things, if things are so, everyone has to be so the same, there's not really any interpretation yourself? Is it really just being able to do the steps at the exact precision that they needed, or how do they tell who the best is, I guess?
Well, so that's where it comes in with our judges. We always have judges, and we, unfortunately, we don't really have such, like in figure skating, gymnastics, and other types of dance, they have categories where they're scored upon. We don't. We just have the judge comes and they decide your score. I mean, of course, there's rules to it. The general rules of Irish dance, of what makes a good Irish dancer, is turned out feet, straight legs, pointed toes, arms in, strong, on time to the music. I mean, each person, though they're dancing to the same music, they're doing different, moves to the music. So it's also, adding in the complexity, like a lot of the champion dancers do very complex steps, but they execute them very well. But yeah, it can be very, very subjective. And especially with, there being 200 plus girls, there's definitely been some times where, you can't really even tell the difference really between some of the girls, because they're all so good and at that level that you can't distinguish. So I don't know how judges do it. I'm not a judge myself. I don't know if I could ever be, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a whole other can of worms when it comes to making sure everybody is subjective, but kind of ties into, exclusivity of being able to get into this. We're talking about how the dresses are all handmade in Ireland. There's these, fancy wigs. I'm sure I want to ask you about the two different kinds of shoes here in a minute, but I'm sure none of these things come at, discount prices. So how hard is it to get into Irish dancing just from a price point?
Oh, it's definitely, luckily I have a family who supports me and, who's able to support my dancing endeavors. But yeah, they can get really pricey. I mean, a single dress without rhinestones can be 2,000, 3,000. Yeah, exactly. And we only wear them for about a year. And that's without rhinestones. And so adding rhinestones, that's a whole other, probably a couple $100 to add on to that. Wigs themselves are like $80. Shoes are 80 because they also are handmade in Ireland. It definitely adds up. I mean, luckily, a lot of the times we can resell stuff. So we always, I've resold shoes, resold dresses, resold wigs if they're in good enough condition. Or I just try to get my most use out of them. I mean, I have a wig that's pretty much destroyed because I wore it for way too long and it looks disgusting. But yeah, so I mean, it definitely is really hard financially, but a lot of times there are people who are willing to help out and, take in used dresses and sell them.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear for sure. And I want to ask you about the shoes here in a moment, but you mentioned that you're able to resell them. That's helpful. Again, with the only other person I've talked to in dance recently with ballet, they mentioned that their shoes are like $200-300, and some people go through a pair of shoes a week because they're just destroyed. So I like to hear that your shoes aren't like that. But tell us a little bit about that, just because I think. I'm thinking that it's probably the soft shoes that look very, very different. Tell us a little bit about the makeup of those shoes. It looks like just all kinds of I don't know, all kinds of straps.
Yeah, so our soft shoes, they're like a ballet slipper. They're made out of leather, handmade in Ireland, like I said. They're very soft and they have just like, a soft sole to them. And then yeah, it's laced in a very weird way. It's almost like having a shoe, but without a tongue in it. So the laces are exposed, but that's to get it so that like the entire shoe just curves to your foot. I mean, the biggest characteristic about Irish dance shoes that I have to always tell the younger girls is you don't want them to feel good. You want them to be super tight and for them to be like glued to your foot, because that's going to give you actually the most support. And it's also going to just make your dancing look a lot better and be easier to point and turn out in.
Yeah. Well, so what's the common injuries in Irish dancing? I assume you're talking about the shoes not feeling well. I'm sure that it doesn't lend itself well to being, creating comfort for your feet. But what's other common injuries?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had my fair share. But some of the most common are, tendonitis in the feet. So overuse of the tendons in your feet. Tons of sprained ankles. I think I've had, 10, 20. I'm actually nursing a sprained ankle right now. Just because, with our dancing and, if you don't have strong enough feet or you're just, really tired and overusing your feet, they become really easy to just bend, and which isn't good. Lots of broken feet. I had a labrum tear, which is also very common within Irish dancers because of the way we move our legs and lift our legs. Our motion is very front and back. It's not side to side like other dances. So it creates a lot of, issues in the hip. And yeah, I mean, I have heard injuries all over the board, from, stress fractures in the back to broken legs to messed up knees. I mean, it's mostly lower body though.
Yeah. But yeah, so you mentioned you're a professional dancer in a company. Does that mean is this a full-time thing for you?
So our company actually works in a way that we can be a full-time professional dancer and a full-time student or have a full-time job. So it is pretty full-time. I mean, I practice, all year round. There's not really much of an off season other than, maybe a week or two in the summer and then a week or two in the winter. But our performing season is actually mainly just in the spring. So, and we always work it so that it's on weekends so that we can attend classes through the week or go to work through the week and then only have to miss, 1 or 2 days due to performing and traveling and then be back. So yeah, it's really nice in that way because I can continue to, have my, college degree and go and, get my college degree while also doing something that I love and that I love to do.
No, that's really awesome. And what does performance look like? I don't know whether there's certain plays or I don't know exactly what a performance looks like. Is it just certain songs that you're gathering an audience to watch you guys perform? Is there any kind of story behind your performances, or how does that work?
I mean, it varies from company to company what a performance looks like. For my company, we have pieces. So they're usually like 6 to 7 minutes long. We have one that's, 10, 11 minutes long. But yeah, so usually within the piece itself, it tells a story about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And so it's kind of, combining a lot of those pieces together. We also have a live band who they perform, the songs with us while we're dancing, but they also have their own songs that tie into certain dances that we do to keep that, consistency throughout the whole show. Our show itself is probably 1.5 hours to 2 hours. I think this year we toned it down a bit just because of COVID, and some places do not want intermissions because of COVID, so it gets shorter in those instances. But yeah, so it's just kind of a compilation of certain dance pieces, and they all kind of flow into each other with different transitions and costumes and everything.
No, that's really cool. What's the longevity of somebody doing it in a professional nature like you? Is there a certain age that most people are out of it? Is it something that people can do for a long time? Is it something that people start transitioning into the teaching role at some point, or what's the longevity?
Irish dance in itself is a very young sport. Just like I said, with all the injuries that you can get, it's very hard on your body. There's a lot of impact to it. But that being said, we have dancers in the company who are, 30 and older who are, still dancing. Of course, Michael Flatley probably is the longest anyone's gone dancing, but he reached the age of 60, I think, while dancing. But even then, towards the end, he had a lot of, limits to what he could do just because of how hard it is on the body. Most of the time by college age, people either, stop dancing, or they start to transition into teaching or going into performing. And then usually if they're performing, it's really just about your body. If you can go, how many years you can go. I'm lucky that I've made it this far, especially with my injuries. So it's really just about taking it, every day at a time, and just, being thankful that you're able to dance again for another day.
Absolutely. And what do you hope, the future holds for you, both in, the Irish dancing world and then just in life in general?
Well, I, love teaching. I'm hoping to be certified for teaching Irish dance. And then performing, I'm trying to go as long as I can, as long as my body will allow. Hopefully that's for a long time, but who knows with injuries and everything. But then outside of life, I'm actually, I'm at North Park University studying biology to become a marine biologist. So that's one goal of mine that I've been working towards. And yeah, to just hopefully I can keep Irish dancing through all that, and keep doing what I love.
No, that sounds awesome. That's really cool. Congratulations and best of luck with all of those goals for sure. So tell us how people can connect with you. Maybe they want to check out that Instagram page, see what this is all about. We've talked so much about it. They're thinking, what is Irish dancing? What's this even look like? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, I do have an Instagram page. It's at CM_Irish_dance. And then I also have a TikTok as well, where I post similar and also extra material, which is at the same username, CM_Irish_dance. You can also see me and my company perform. We're the Trinity Irish Dance Company. And then we have, I think, 3 or 4 more shows to end up the season, and one in, Minnesota, 2 in Wisconsin. So they can definitely check out our tours. And if they can't catch us this season, can see us next season.
No, that's awesome. Is that where, is St. Patrick's Day, is that your big day? Obviously with ballet, I keep mentioning ballet. People are going to listen to this and think, we're talking about Irish dance, why you keep mentioning ballet? But that's the only thing that I've talked to somebody about. Nutcracker's huge. Of course, if you're in ballet anytime during Christmas season, hopefully you're part of a Nutcracker performance. Is St. Patrick's Day where really all of the big things happen?
Yeah, I mean that's when, even schools kind of drift away from the competition side of things and they do more performance stuff. So, I grew up, when I was 8 going to bars and performing at for St. Patrick's Day. I mean, it's a lot of fun, lots of parades. It's definitely probably our most busiest time of the year, but it's also, what we look forward to most. It's just a lot of fun and dancing and, kind of relaxing from any competition or stresses of the normal year.
No, I think that's really cool. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So that was Claudia Morrison. Really enjoyed speaking with her. Learned so much about Irish dance. That was kind of one when I was looking at these performance art. Of course, I wanted to talk to somebody in the ballet world, but I knew I wanted to talk to somebody in Irish dance too, just because it's such an interesting dance style. Just, with the whole not moving your arms. Now we kind of know why that is, but we kind of don't because it is kind of a lore behind it. But I really, really enjoyed speaking with her. Learned quite a bit, about Irish dance. Still a ton to learn, but just like anytime we speak to somebody in the performance arts, I urge you go check it out live. If you're interested, definitely. I don't think it'll disappoint. I'm going to put a link to her dance company, Trinity Irish Dance. I'll put the website in the show notes. I'll put her Instagram in the show notes. Go check them out. It seems like they tour quite a bit. So if they're coming to a town near you, I think you're in for a really, really cool performance. So thanks for being here. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and learning just a little bit about Irish dance and all the podcasts. That's what it's here for, is to just teach you a little bit about different people every week. I will be doing that again next week, so make sure that you're subscribed, that you follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Appreciate that. Leave a review. Appreciate that even more. Go follow us on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast. But appreciate your support. Thanks for being here. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.